Alright, trusty ape. Do something a little bit different today. Today is Thursday, 19th of September 2024. I'm at my couch instead of my desk this morning. Got a little bit of distance between me and that wall. So I decided to look at some U.S. history that I thought was interesting. This came up over at the Happiness Lab podcast with Laurie Santos, and they kind of mentioned it briefly, and it also came up somewhat in in the book I've been reading, Twilight of Democracy by Anne Applebaum. And so this is like a lesser known assassination of a U.S. president. Most of the time when we think of assassinated presidents, we think of like Lincoln and JFK. This guy, William McKinley, seems a bit more obscure. And part of that, I think, is because of the circumstances surrounding the assassination. And I want to look into the assassin because I think that's a very interesting part of this story. All right. So William McKinley, January 29th, 1843 to September 14th, 1901, was the 25th President of the United States, serving from 1897 until his assassination in 1901. A member of the Republican Party, he led a realignment that made Republicans largely dominant in the industrial states and nationwide for decades. He presided over victory in the Spanish-American War of 1898, gained control of Hawaii, Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines, restored prosperity after a deep depression, rejected the inflationary monetary policy of free silver, keeping the nation on the gold standard, and raised protective tariffs. McKinley was the last president to have served in the American Civil War. He was the only one to begin his service as an enlisted man and ended as a brevet major. After the war, he settled in Canton, Ohio, where he practiced law and married Ida Saxton. In 1876, McKinley was elected to Congress, where he became the Republican expert on the protective tariff, which he believed would bring prosperity. Controversial, and together with a Democratic redistricting aimed at gerrymandering him out of office, led to his defeat in the Democratic landslide of 1890. He was elected governor of Ohio in 1891 and 1893, steering a moderate course between capital nomination for president in 1896 amid a deep progressive era. McKinley's presidency saw rapid economic growth. He promoted the 1897 Dingley Tariff to protect manufacturers and factory workers from foreign competition, and in 1900 secured the passage of the Gold Standard Act. He hoped to persuade Spain to grant independence to rebellious Cuba without conflict. Still, when negotiation failed, he requested and signed Congress's declaration of war to begin. As part of the peace settlement, Spain turned over to the United States its main overseas colonies, control of the United States Army until May 20th, 1902. The United States focused on imperialism, protectionism, and free silver. His son, Czolgosz, an anarchist. McKinley died 8 days later and was succeeded by Vice President Theodore Roosevelt. As an innovator of American interventionism and pro-business sentiment, McKinley is generally ranked as an above-average president. However, his takeover of the Philippines is often criticized as an act of imperialism. I think that's interesting, too, that he was succeeded by Roosevelt, who, if I remember correctly, somewhere over here. Oops, shit. Did not mean to. So now this guy, Leon Czolgosz. Leon F. Czolgosz, his name is Polish, right? Born May 5th, 1873, died October 29th, 1901, was a Polish-American laborer and anarchist who assassinated United States President William McKinley on September 6, 1901, in Buffalo, New York. The president died on September 14th after his wound became infected. Caught in the act, Czolgosz was tried, convicted, and executed by the state of New York 7 weeks later, on October 29, 1901. Now, the first thing that comes up is because of how this guy's name sounds, right? It sounded foreign. So they painted him as like a foreign infiltrator, right? Like the anarchy was being brought from Poland somehow, or the anarchist movement, right? But he was actually American born. And so one of the points that I heard made was that this kind of happens frequently, is they don't actually look at the nationality of the person. They will look on whether they have like a foreign sounding name, and then seek to kind of blame that outside entity, right? That other nation, right? This isn't a U.S. problem. It's a problem of immigration. But Czolgosz was born in Detroit, Michigan. According to his father, Paul Czolgosz, the F did not stand for anything, which apparently was his middle initial, and it was there because he liked the extra initial. He was one of 8 children born to the Polish-American family of Paul Czolgosz, 1843 to 1944, and his wife, Mary or Maria Novak. The family moved to Alpena, Michigan in 1880 when Leon was 10, and the family was living in Posen, Michigan. Czolgosz's mother died 6 weeks after giving birth to his sister Victoria in 1889. The Czolgoshes moved to Natrona, Pennsylvania, where Leon worked at a glass factory. At age 17, they moved to Cleveland, Ohio, where he found employment at the Cleveland Rolling Mill Company. After the economic crash of 1893, when the mill closed for some time and tried to reduce wages, the workers went on strike. With great economic and social turmoil around him, Czolgosz found little comfort in the Catholic Church and other immigrant institutions. He sought others who shared his concerns regarding injustice. He joined a moderate working man's socialist club, the Knights of the Golden Eagle, and eventually a more radical socialist group known as the Sila Club, where he became interested in anarchism. In 1898, after witnessing a series of similar strikes, many ending in violence, and perhaps ill from a respiratory disease, Czolgosz went to live with his father, who had bought a 50-acre farm the year before in Warrensville, Ohio. Czolgosz became a recluse. He was impressed after hearing a speech by the anarchist Emma Goldman, whom he met for the first time at one of her lectures in Cleveland in May 1901. After the lecture, Czolgosz approached the speaker's platform and asked her for reading recommendations. On the afternoon of July 12, 1901, he visited her at the home of Abraham Isaac, publisher of the newspaper Free Society in Chicago, and introduced himself as Fred C. Neiman. Nobody. But Goldman was on her way to the train station. He told her that he was disappointed in Cleveland's socialists, and Goldman quickly introduced him to anarchist friends who were at the train station. She later wrote a piece in defense of Czolgosz, which portrays him and his history in a way at odds with other sources. Quote, "Who can tell how many times this American child has gloried in the celebration of the 4th of July, or on Decoration Day when he faithfully honored the nation's dead? Who knows but what he, too, was willing to fight for his country and die for her liberty?" End quote. In the weeks that followed, Czolgosz's social awkwardness, evasiveness, and blunt inquiries about secret societies around Isaac and another anarchist, Emil Schilling, resulted in the Radical Free Society newspaper to issue a warning pertaining to him on September 1st, reading, "Attention! The attention of the comrades is called to another spy. He is well dressed, of medium height, rather narrow shoulders, blond, and about 25 years of age. Up to the present, he has made his appearance in Chicago and Cleveland. In the former place he remained but a short time, while in Cleveland he disappeared when the comrades had confirmed themselves of his identity, and were on the point of exposing him. His demeanor is of the usual sort, pretending to be greatly interested in the cause, asking for names, or soliciting aid for acts of contemplated violence. If this same individual makes his appearance elsewhere, the comrades are warned in advance and can act accordingly. Everett Marshall, Free Society. Czolgosz believed that there was a great injustice in American society, an inequality which allowed the wealthy to enrich themselves by exploiting the poor. He concluded that the reason for this was the structure of government. About this time, he learned the assassination of a leader in Europe, King Umberto I of Italy, who had been shot dead by anarchist Gaetano Bresci on July 29, 1900. Bresci told the press that he had decided to take matters into his own hands for the sake of the common man. On August 31, 1901, Czolgosz traveled to Buffalo, New York, the site of the Pan American Exposition, where President McKinley would be speaking. He rented a room in the Novak's Hotel at 1078 Broadway. Excuse me. On September 6, Czolgosz went to the exposition armed with a concealed .32 caliber Iver Johnson safety automatic revolver he had purchased 4 days earlier. He approached McKinley, who had been standing in a receiving line inside of the Temple of Music, greeting the public for 10 minutes. At 4:07 p.m., Czolgosz reached the front of the line. While McKinley extended his hand, Czolgosz slapped it aside and shot the president twice in the abdomen at point-blank range. The first bullet ricocheted off of a coat button and lodged in McKinley's jacket. The other seriously wounded him in the stomach. September 14, 1901, of an infection that had spread from the wound. James Parker, a man standing directly behind Czolgosz, struck the assassin in the neck and knocked the gun out of his hand. As McKinley slumped backward, members of the crowd began beating Czolgosz. "Go easy on him, boys," McKinley told the attackers. The police struggled to keep the angry crowd off Czolgosz. Czolgosz was taken to Buffalo's 13th Precinct house at 346 Austin Street and held in a cell until he was moved to police headquarters. There's some renderings of the assassination. That looks like a photo. Yeah, so he had the gun hidden under a handkerchief, apparently. So another note, apparently, so the Secret Service wasn't a guard to the president at this time. They were mainly in the business of trying to bust counterfeiters. Although McKinley did have bodyguards, he refused to let them stand beside him at this engagement because he wanted direct access to the public. After McKinley's death, newly inaugurated President Theodore Roosevelt declared, "When compared with the suppression of anarchy, every other question sinks into insignificance." On September 13th, the day before McKinley succumbed to his wounds, Czolgosz was taken from the police headquarters, which were undergoing repairs, and transferred to the Erie County Women's Penitentiary temporarily. On September 16th, he was brought to the Erie County Jail to be arraigned before County Judge Emery. After the arraignment, Czolgosz was transferred to Auburn Prison. A grand jury indicted Czolgosz on September 16th with one count of first-degree murder. Throughout his incarceration, Czolgosz spoke freely with his guards, but he refused every interaction with Robert C. Titus and Lauren L. Lewis, the prominent judges turned attorneys assigned to defend him, and with the expert psychiatrists sent to test his sanity. The case was prosecuted by the Erie County District Attorney, Thomas Penny, and Assistant DA Frederick Holler, whose performance was described as flawless. Although Czolgosz answered that he was pleading guilty, presiding Judge Truman C. White overruled him and entered a not guilty plea on his behalf. Czolgosz's trial began in the state courthouse in Buffalo on September 23, 1901, 9 days after McKinley died. Prosecution testimony took 2 days and consisted principally of the doctors who treated McKinley and various eyewitnesses to the shooting. Lewis and his co-counsel called no witnesses, which Lewis in his closing argument attributed to Czolgosz's refusal to cooperate with them. In his 27-minute address to the jury, Lewis took pains to praise McKinley. Scott Miller, author of The President and the Assassin, notes that the closing argument was more calculated to defend the attorney's place in the community rather than an effort to spare his client the electric chair. Even had the jury believed the defense that Czolgosz was insane by claiming that no sane man would have shot and killed the president in such a public and blatant manner, knowing he would be caught, there was still the legal definition of insanity to overcome. Under New York law, Czolgosz was legally insane only if he was unable to understand what he was doing. The jury was unconvinced of Czolgosz's insanity due to the directions given to them by Judge White. They voted to convict him after less than a half hour of deliberations. A jury member later said it would have been sooner, but they wanted to review the evidence before conviction. Czolgosz had two visits the night before his execution, one with 2 clergymen and another later in the night with his brother and brother-in-law. Even though Czolgosz refused Father Fudzinski and Father Hickey twice, Superintendent Collins permitted their visits and escorted them to his cell. The priests pleaded for 45 minutes for him to repent, but he refused, and they left. His brother Waldeck and brother-in-law Frank Bandowski visited after the priests had left. His brother asked him, "Who got you into this scrape?" To which Czolgosz responded, "No one. Nobody had anything to do with it but me." His brother said it was unlike him, and was not how he was raised. When asked by his brother if he wanted the priests to come back, Czolgosz said, "No, damn them. Don't send them here again. I don't want them. And don't you have any praying over me when I'm dead. I don't want it. I don't want any of their damned religion." His father wrote a letter to his son the night before his execution, wishing him luck and informing him that he could no longer help him, and Leon had to pay the price for his actions. Although after the trial, they chose not to after Czolgosz declined. Also, the attorneys knew that there were no grounds for appeal. The trial had been quick, swift, and fair. Czolgosz's last words were, "I killed the president because he was the enemy of the good people, the working people. I am not sorry for my crime. I am sorry I could not see my father." Czolgosz was electrocuted by 3 jolts, each of 1,800 volts, in the Auburn prison on October 29, 1901. 45 days after McKinley's death. He was pronounced dead at 7:14 a.m. The state electrician or executioner of Czolgosz was Edwin Davis. When Waldeck asked the warden for his brother's body to be taken for proper burial, he was informed that he would never be able to take it away, and that crowds of people would mob him. Czolgosz was autopsied by John E. Guerin. His brain was autopsied by Edward Anthony Spitzka. The autopsy showed his teeth were normal but in poor condition. Likewise, the external genitals were normal, although scars were present, the result of chancroids. The autopsy showed the deceased was in good health. A death mask was made of his face. The body was buried on prison grounds following the autopsy. Prison authorities had planned to inter the body with quicklime to hasten its decomposition, but decided otherwise after testing quicklime on a sample of meat. After determining that they were not legally limited to the use of quicklime for the process, they poured sulfuric acid into Czolgosz's coffin so that his body would be completely disfigured. The warden estimated that the acid caused the body to disintegrate within 12 hours. His clothes and possessions were burned in the prison's incinerator to discourage exhibitions of his life. Emma Goldman was arrested on suspicion of being involved in the assassination, but was released due to insufficient evidence. She later incurred a great deal of negative publicity when she published The Tragedy at Buffalo. In the article, she compared Czolgosz to Marcus Junius Brutus, the assassin of Julius Caesar, and called McKinley the president of the money kings and trust magnates. Other anarchists and radicals were unwilling to support Goldman's efforts to aid Czolgosz, believing that he had harmed the movement. Scene of the crime, the Temple of Music was demolished in November 1901, along with the rest of the exposition's temporary structures. A stone marker in the median of the Fordham Drive, now a residential street in Buffalo, marks the approximate spot where the shooting occurred. Czolgosz's revolver is on display at the Pan American Exposition exhibit at the Buffalo History Museum in Buffalo. After Czolgosz's death, Lloyd Vernon Briggs, 1863 to 1941, a Boston alienist who later became the director of the Massachusetts Department for Mental Hygiene, reviewed the Czolgosz case in 1901 on behalf of psychiatrist Walter Channing, 1849 to 1921, concluding Czolgosz was insane. That conclusion has since been challenged. Czolgosz is buried at Soul Cemetery in Cayuga County, New York. His grave is unmarked with a stone reading, Fort Hill remains. All right, well, that's the story. And yeah, I just thought it'd be an interesting one to read about. Again, just something lesser known that I wasn't very aware of. And yeah, it makes me think a lot about these recent attempts of political violence. And yeah, I haven't been following very closely, so I just hear about the most extreme cases in this election. I did watch a bit of that now infamous debate over on, I watched the End Time review of it and a couple others, and yeah, it's kind of frightening. The political situation we're facing here in the United States and the social the divides amongst us here that just seem to continue growing, and it makes me wonder about a solution. Sometimes, I don't advocate for violence, but it seems that the only way that people truly come together is in times of great tragedy and calamity. So I don't know. Maybe chaos is the answer sometimes. Anyway, that's about it for me. I'm going to get out of here. I've got some business to attend to. It's been slow going around here this week, and I'm trying not to succumb to any type of negativity. So, that being said, Path of Equanimity will be hosting tomorrow night, and put details of that up shortly. All right, have a happy and safe Thursday, everyone.